Veronica Caldwell had been raised with modest means in a small Midwest town called Havenwood. When she first met Arthur, it was during a charity event at the luxurious Blackwell Hotel in downtown Chicago, where she had been working as an event organizer. He introduced himself with a gentle smile and impeccable charm, claiming to be a philanthropist looking to support children's healthcare initiatives. Veronica was drawn to his warmth and what appeared to be genuine kindness. Arthur was a man with an understated confidence and a magnetic presence that commanded the room. After weeks of casual dates, mostly at public places like art galleries, fancy brunch spots, and one memorable evening at the Chicago Symphony, Veronica found herself swept into Arthur's extravagant world. Diamonds, fine wines, designer gowns. These were all new to her. Yet, despite the sudden wealth and whirlwind romance, Arthur always seemed open and attentive, making her feel truly seen. But those early days were a stark contrast to what Veronica discovered that fateful evening at the Caldwell mansion. The estate, perched on 10 acres just outside the city, boasted a lush garden, a private lake, and a breathtaking view of the skyline. Arthur often hosted lavish fundraisers there, inviting everyone from local politicians to Hollywood celebrities. At one such event, Veronica, now Mrs. Caldwell for nearly 3 years, noticed her husband had slipped away from the main gathering. When he didn't return, she went searching. She passed the rose garden, circled around the pool house, and eventually found herself outside the upstairs study. A strange giggle echoed through the hallway. With her hand trembling on the doorknob, she peeked inside. There, under the glow of a crystal chandelier, Arthur's arms were intimately wrapped around a woman Veronica had never seen before. Her world cracked in an instant. In that moment, Veronica felt her entire body go numb. She wanted to burst through the door, confront them both, and demand answers. But something stopped her. Instead, she crept backward, heart-hammering tears stinging her eyes, until she found her way back downstairs. She needed to breathe. She needed to think. Throughout the rest of the evening, she maintained her composure with an otherworldly grace she never knew she possessed. She greeted guests engaged in polite conversation, forced laughter when required. The man she believed was her loving husband eventually reappeared, guiding that same mystery woman around the party, with a dazzling smile on his face. Veronica watched from a distance. Her mind spiraled, replaying his affectionate gaze, the gentle way he pressed a hand to the woman's back. The reality settled in Arthur Caldwell. Her beloved husband was having an affair right there in their home. The next morning, Veronica woke early, exhausted but resolute. She needed clarity, so she confronted Arthur the moment he walked into the breakfast lounge. He greeted her with a casual kiss on the cheek, as if nothing had happened. But Veronica could see the flicker of panic in his eyes when she slid her phone across the marble table, showing him a candid photo she'd managed to snap of him and his companion the night before. Arthur's expression froze, and for a moment his perpetual calm facade cracked. He tried to stammer out an excuse, something about a harmless flirtation, a misunderstanding, the woman being a potential investor. Veronica felt her stomach churn. She might have believed him once, but the way he'd held that stranger was anything but professional. Before Arthur could collect himself, she walked out. The weight of betrayal settled heavily on her shoulders, fueling her next step. Though Veronica had never considered divorce or anything drastic, she wasn't naive. Growing up with a single mother who struggled to make ends meet taught her one thing. Preparation was everything. She had a friend from college, Laura Singletary, who now worked as an associate at a prestigious law firm in Chicago. Veronica left the mansion and sped through winding roads until she reached Laura's office. Tearing up in the reception area, Veronica recounted the entire incident from the moment she caught Arthur in the act to his feeble denials. Laura, always pragmatic and fiercely loyal, recommended they call in a top-tier attorney specializing in complex divorces and asset management. That was when Lisa Bloom's name came up. Realizing how complicated things might get, especially given Arthur's wealth and political connections, Veronica agreed. She wanted the best, and if it meant going toe-to-toe with her husband's empire, so be it. Within hours, Laura had arranged a meeting in Lisa Bloom's chic downtown office. Veronica sat in a plush leather chair, scanning the glossy photos of high-profile clients on the walls, feeling both intimidated and strangely emboldened. Lisa entered with a focused energy, wearing a smart black suit and practical heels. She listened intently as Veronica poured out her story. When Veronica finished, Lisa's eyes narrowed with professional determination. "We have options," she said firmly, detailing the potential legal strategies. Filing for divorce was straightforward. But if Arthur was indeed funneling money or shifting assets around, Veronica needed to act fast to ensure she got her fair share. You'd be surprised, Lisa warned, how many times wealthy spouses try to hide funds overseas or in obscure trusts once they suspect a breakup. Veronica's head swirled, but she knew one thing: she had to protect herself. With a deep breath, she agreed to proceed. On Lisa's advice, they decided to file a petition for divorce and a motion to freeze Arthur's assets immediately. Veronica wasn't out for revenge. At least that's what she told herself. But she'd poured her heart into the marriage, invested her life in supporting Arthur's philanthropic endeavors. She wasn't about to be left with nothing if he decided to vanish half his fortune before the ink on the divorce papers dried. The legal process began with a flurry of phone calls, paperwork, and discreet investigations into Arthur's financial dealings. Veronica felt both liberated and terrified. Each phone call with Lisa or Laura revealed more complexities: shell companies overseas, accounts, business partners who might not be entirely legitimate. She discovered that Arthur was far wealthier than she'd even realized. The sense of betrayal grew deeper. Not only had he been unfaithful, he'd also kept hidden parts of his life from her. The first real confrontation happened just 3 days after she filed. Veronica was alone in the Caldwell mansion, in the very study where she'd caught Arthur cheating. She was packing up some personal belongings when she heard footsteps in the hallway. Arthur appeared, face taut with anger, a crumpled envelope in his hand. "You served me divorce papers," he said, voice shaking with fury. Veronica tried to stand her ground, but fear twisted in her stomach. Arthur looked like a man pushed beyond his limits. "You cheated on me," she responded, her voice surprisingly steady. "There's no going back." Arthur launched into an elaborate denial, trying every angle, blame, begging threats. He claimed her lawsuit was a blatant money grab, accusing her of only wanting his fortune. Veronica's hands trembled, but her resolve remained firm. She walked out, letting his accusations echo unanswered behind her. News of the divorce filing spread through Chicago's high society in a matter of hours. Rumors swirled at country clubs, upscale boutiques, and charity luncheons. Veronica's phone buzzed non-stop with messages from so-called friends and acquaintances. Some offered fake sympathy fishing for juicy details. Others criticized her, whispering that she was a gold digger, trying to ruin poor Arthur Caldwell. Public opinion seemed divided. Arthur had a long-standing reputation as a philanthropic hero, especially for his donations to children's hospitals. Many found it hard to believe he could have engaged in an affair, let alone hidden a labyrinth of assets. Veronica's quiet heartbreak was overshadowed by the scandal of the lawsuit as tabloids and gossip columns exploded with sensational headlines. Millionaire mogul's marriage meltdown, Arthur Caldwell's dirty secrets. Veronica felt exposed, betrayed not just by Arthur, but by the so-called friends who relished in her downfall. In the midst of this media storm, Veronica found unexpected allies. One evening, she received a call from Deborah Knight, a long-time patron of the arts. Deborah and her husband had been close to Arthur and Veronica, but Deborah confessed that she had witnessed odd financial dealings over the years. She'd never said anything before, not wanting to stir the waters. Deborah offered to share what she knew about Arthur's suspicious transactions. Things like off-the-record property deals and shell corporations set up in the Caymans. "I'm not proud of staying silent," Deborah said, "but I'm willing to help if it means stopping him from hurting more people." Veronica felt a surge of gratitude, relieved that she wasn't alone. Perhaps she realized some in their circle were more than superficial partygoers. They were individuals of conscience, willing to support her in this legal and emotional minefield. Meanwhile, Arthur's legal team swung into action. They filed a countersuit, claiming Veronica had violated prenuptial agreements Veronica never even remembered signing. Supposedly, these documents limited her claim on his estate and required her to keep certain marital disputes private. Arthur's lawyers accused Veronica of defamation, insisting she had tarnished his public image by speaking to the press. The pressure was immense. Paparazzi camped outside Veronica's new apartment, in a modest downtown building, snapping photos whenever she left to meet Lisa Bloom. Journalists hounded her mother for interviews, digging into every aspect of her past. And swirling amid it all were questions about the mystery woman. Who was she, and what role did she play in Arthur's business? Empire Lisa advised Veronica to keep a low profile. But Veronica realized that the more she tried to hide, the more the tabloids conjured false narratives about her. As depositions and court hearings loomed, Veronica discovered a new layer of deceit. A friend with contacts in city government hinted that Arthur was planning to transfer significant capital to a secret bank account in Switzerland. Furious and frightened, Veronica relayed this information to Lisa. If that transfer happened before the asset freeze took effect, Veronica might lose the financial security she sought, making it nearly impossible to claim what was legally hers. Lisa moved swiftly, filing motions and lobbying the judge for an emergency hearing to freeze Arthur's assets immediately, citing the risk of asset dissipation. It was a bold move and an unprecedented one. In that jurisdiction, usually these matters took months to settle, and judges were reluctant to freeze someone's finances without irrefutable evidence. But the potential for fraud was too great to ignore. The showdown in court was set, and tensions soared to new heights. Standing outside the courthouse with cameras flashing and reporters shouting questions, Veronica felt her heart pounding like a bass drum. She spotted Arthur exiting his black luxury sedan across the street, flanked by his high-powered legal team. He offered the crowd a tight-lipped smile. The hearing room was surprisingly small, adorned with old wood paneling and a single American flag by the judge's bench. Veronica sat beside Lisa Bloom and Laura, her hands trembling beneath the table. Arthur's attorney, a seasoned litigator named Bradley Fisher, exuded confidence as he argued that there was no credible evidence Arthur was hiding assets. But Lisa had prepared meticulously. She presented emails from Deborah Knight referencing suspicious accounts, photographs of Arthur's confidential files, and even a recorded phone conversation provided anonymously that hinted at Arthur's intention to offload millions in real estate. The judge listened intently, scowling as he leafed through the documents. After 2 hours of tense testimony and fervent arguments, the judge leaned forward. He reprimanded Arthur's team for lack of transparency and expressed concern about the possibility of undisclosed financial maneuvers. Mr. Caldwell, the judge, intoned voice, echoing in the silent chamber. The evidence is concerning. Therefore, pending further investigation, I'm granting the motion to temporarily freeze your primary liquid assets. A stunned hush fell over the courtroom. Veronica couldn't breathe. She glanced at Arthur, whose face blanched, eyes flashing with outrage. He whispered something to his attorney before storming out. In the hallway, reporters bombarded Veronica with questions. Though her heart hammered, she kept her statement brief. I have confidence in our judicial system and believe the truth will come out. The cameras captured her every word, broadcasting the image of a determined woman refusing to back down against a powerful millionaire. That night, Veronica returned to her apartment and found an envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a letter from an anonymous source typed in neat block letters. It warned her of imminent threats, suggesting that Arthur might retaliate in ways beyond legal maneuvers. She felt her blood turn cold, recalling stories of wealthy tycoons who went to extreme lengths to preserve their fortunes. Terrified, she showed the letter to Lisa Bloom the next morning. Lisa looked alarmed. I'll hire a private security consultant, she said. This might just be a scare tactic, but we can't take any chances. Veronica reluctantly agreed. A small team of security professionals began monitoring her building's entrance, and she was advised to vary her driving routes. She felt like she was living in a crime thriller rather than a divorce dispute. But if Arthur was truly desperate, who knew what he might do next? In an effort to regain some normalcy, Veronica decided to pay a visit to her mother, Marianne Parker, back in Havenwood. She arrived in the sleepy town at dusk, seeking solace in the familiar. The small house with peeling white paint stood as a warm reminder of simpler days. Marianne opened the door with teary eyes and enveloped her daughter in a hug. Inside over cups of mint tea, Veronica confided everything about Arthur's affair, the lawsuit and the mounting threats. Marianne listened quietly. Sadness etched across her face. I always felt there was something too perfect about Arthur, she admitted. You deserved someone honest, someone who didn't hide behind a $1 million smile. Despite the comfort of her mother's presence, Veronica's mind couldn't rest. She knew she couldn't stay in Havenwood for long. Court dates and 1,000 unanswered questions awaited her back in the city. Returning to Chicago, Veronica discovered Arthur had unleashed a new wave of attacks. Publicly, he insisted Veronica was psychologically unstable, citing episodes from her past, a flat-out lie he'd likely fabricated. A swarm of reporters camped outside her apartment, speculating about her mental health. Friends called in confusion. Some even scolded her for dragging Arthur's name through the mud. Lisa Bloom arranged a press conference at her firm's office to set the record straight. Veronica, nerves on edge, stood before a sea of microphones and delivered a measured statement. These allegations are false. I have never been diagnosed with any mental health condition, nor have I experienced episodes. I am simply standing up for my rights. She left immediately afterward, tears brimming. The cruelty of Arthur's campaign to discredit her felt like a second betrayal, compounding the heartbreak she'd already endured from his affair. Yet amidst the chaos, a breakthrough arrived. Laura Singletary had been quietly digging into Arthur's corporate records. Late one evening, she called Veronica, voice trembling with excitement. I've found something big, she whispered. Arthur's name is tied to shell companies that own multi-million-dollar condos in Dubai, plus a luxury yacht in Monaco, assets he never declared. Veronica's heart pounded. If this was true, it could strengthen her case immeasurably. The existence of hidden foreign properties would prove Arthur's efforts to conceal wealth. Laura promised to pass the information to Lisa Bloom so they could present it at the next hearing. That night, Veronica scarcely slept. Though the revelations were disturbing, they also gave her a spark of hope. Every new piece of evidence chipped away at Arthur's untouchable facade. Perhaps she wasn't fighting an impossible battle after all. Maybe, just maybe, truth would prevail. At the subsequent hearing, Lisa Bloom filed additional motions to freeze all international assets tied to Arthur Caldwell. Predictably, Arthur's team fought back, denying any wrongdoing. Bradley Fisher produced alleged independent audits, claiming no hidden holdings existed. But Lisa seized on Laura's evidence bank statements, property registrations, and even pictures of Arthur cruising on the very yacht he claimed he didn't own. The judge, now wary of Arthur's denials, allowed more time for forensic accountants to comb through the labyrinth of financial documents. He extended the asset freeze, broadening its scope to include any property or account where Arthur Caldwell was a beneficiary. A hush fell over the courtroom as the judge spoke those words. Arthur looked like he'd swallowed glass. Outside, Veronica exhaled a shaky sigh of relief. With each legal victory, she felt the grip of Arthur's power loosening, though she knew the fight was far from over. In the weeks that followed, Veronica wrestled with her emotions. The love she once felt for Arthur lingered like a phantom ache. She couldn't deny that they'd shared good times charity galas, where she felt proud of his generosity, heartfelt moments spent planning a future together, evenings gazing at the lake from their bedroom window. But that Arthur seemed like a distant memory now. The man threatening her in court, undermining her reputation, and brazenly lying about hidden assets was a stranger. She tried to remember when she'd first noticed cracks in their relationship. Maybe it was when he started taking more business trips without explanation, or when he began making grand promises but never followed through. Despite the pain, Veronica steeled herself. This was the path she'd chosen, and she would see it through. She wasn't just fighting for money. She was fighting for her dignity, her self-respect. One afternoon, as Veronica reviewed documents in Lisa's office, a knock at the door startled them both. A young paralegal walked in, looking visibly shaken. "Mr. Caldwell's attorneys just served a subpoena for your personal diaries and journals," she said, handing over a stack of papers. Veronica felt her cheeks burn. She had never kept a detailed diary, but the attempt to pry into her private thoughts was alarming. Lisa read through the subpoena, her expression turning grim. "They're trying to build a narrative that you're emotionally unstable and vindictive," she explained. "We'll file a motion to quash this, but it's a reminder of how far Arthur is willing to go." A wave of indignation washed over Veronica. It wasn't enough for Arthur to cheat and lie. He wanted to scour her most personal moments, all for the sake of destroying her credibility in court. That evening, Veronica retreated to her apartment, bolting the door against the world. She sank onto the couch, hugging a throw pillow, feeling utterly drained. A year ago, her life was filled with optimism, plans for children, philanthropic projects, even the possibility of expanding their charitable foundation. Now she was mired in depositions, asset traces, and vicious public speculation. She closed her eyes, recalling the last words her mother spoke before she left Havenwood Hold. "Onto your truth, Veronica. People can spin lies all they want, but if you don't bend, they can't break you." She repeated those words like a mantra. Finally, summoning her courage, Veronica opened her laptop and typed out a statement of her own. She decided to speak directly to the press, carefully, and with Lisa's oversight. She would reveal the facts as she knew them. No embellishments, just the stark truth of Arthur Caldwell's betrayal. The next morning, Veronica's statement was published in several reputable outlets, including the Chicago Tribune. She wrote plainly about discovering Arthur's affair, about the suspicious financial behavior, and about her desire for a fair divorce settlement. Nothing more, nothing less. She didn't mention the intimidation tactics or the threatening letter. Instead, she let the evidence of hidden assets speak for itself. Almost immediately, social media lit up. To Veronica's relief, a growing number of voices expressed sympathy and support, condemning Arthur's actions. Over time, the narrative shifted slightly. People began to see beyond the tabloid's sensational headlines and question the philanthropic image Arthur had so carefully cultivated. Arthur's PR machine fired back, releasing a glossy interview in which he insisted he was the victim of a vindictive spouse. But for the first time, people seemed less inclined to believe him. As the divorce case neared its most critical stage, Veronica's nights were haunted by nightmares, Arthur towering over her gavel in hand, banishing her to a life of isolation and poverty. She'd wake in a cold sweat, gasping for air, only to find herself alone in her tiny apartment. Yet each day she donned her armor of resolve and faced new legal challenges. She sat through excruciating depositions, endured the scorn of Arthur's attorneys, and battled the relentless swirl of public gossip. Each time, Arthur tried to twist facts or smear her character. Lisa produced evidence that steadily eroded his defenses. Slowly, methodically, the puzzle pieces were coming together. The yacht in Monaco, the condos in Dubai, the secret Swiss account. Veronica could almost see the day she'd stand victorious in court, the day she'd reclaim her life and her pride. Then came an unexpected twist. A woman named Juliana Martinez reached out to Lisa's office claiming to be Arthur's former personal assistant. Nervous and hesitant, she confessed she had direct knowledge of Arthur's illicit dealings. Juliana said she could provide concrete proof emails, bank transfers, phone call recordings. But she was scared. Arthur had once threatened to ruin her career if she ever turned on him. Veronica and Lisa arranged a discreet meeting at a small cafe on the outskirts of the city. Juliana arrived looking over her shoulder as if she expected Arthur to materialize at any moment. She produced a folder stuffed with documents. "He made me sign NDAs," Juliana whispered. "But I can't keep quiet anymore. Not after what he did to you." Flipping through the folder, Veronica's eyes widened at the incriminating details transfers from Arthur's main company to offshore accounts. This could be the smoking gun they needed. The next day, Lisa Bloom filed new motions with this fresh evidence. Arthur's attorney, Bradley Fisher, tried to dismiss Juliana's testimony as the ramblings of a disgruntled ex-employee. However, the authenticity of the documents was quickly verified by forensic experts. Suddenly, Arthur found himself cornered. As tensions mounted, rumors circulated that Arthur was considering an out-of-court settlement. He feared a lengthy trial would expose more of his secrets, tarnishing his carefully maintained image beyond repair. Yet Veronica couldn't shake the feeling that he was stalling, waiting for an opportunity to strike back or shift funds one last time. Lisa cautioned Veronica to stay alert. If Arthur decided to settle, it might come with conditions like strict confidentiality clauses. But Veronica was beyond caring about hush money. She wanted accountability. She was determined to stand her ground, no matter how fiercely Arthur fought to maintain control. The court date for the next major hearing arrived under the weight of an overcast sky. Veronica dressed in a simple navy suit, her hair pulled back neatly. As she entered the courthouse, she spotted a throng of reporters again. But she also saw familiar faces, friends like Deborah Knight and Laura Singletree, there to offer moral support. Even her mother was in the crowd, holding Veronica's hand briefly before she stepped into the hearing room. Arthur was already inside, pacing near the defense table. His skin looked pale, and his eyes brimmed with a jittery anger. When proceedings began, Lisa systematically presented the newly obtained documents from Juliana Martinez. The judge examined them, asked questions, listened to both sides. By midday, it was clear the court had seen enough to suspect significant financial impropriety. Arthur's team requested a recess to consult privately. The tension in the room was palpable. During the recess, Arthur surprised everyone by approaching Veronica in the hallway. He held his hands up in a gesture of surrender. "We don't need to fight like this," he said, voice low. "We can work out an arrangement." For a fleeting moment, Veronica glimpsed the Arthur she once knew, the caring philanthropist, the man who'd first swept her off her feet. But she also remembered his betrayal, the lies, the smear campaign, the hidden assets. She met his gaze. "We could have Arthur," she replied, "but you made it impossible." He swallowed hard and reached into his pocket, pulling out a handwritten note. "My settlement offer," he said, thrusting it at her. Veronica took it, scanning the figures. It was a substantial sum, enough to ensure she'd live comfortably for the rest of her life. But it came with a catch, a strict non-disclosure agreement about his affairs. Veronica's heart pounded as she read the terms. She could end this war now. No more court battles. No more invasive questions. No more paparazzi. But she'd have to bury the truth, pretend the affair, and the underhanded asset hiding never happened. She'd be free financially, but gagged morally. When she looked up, Arthur's expression was calm, almost smug. He assumed she would jump at the chance to walk away from the drama. She shook her head slowly, handing back the note. "I can't," she said. "I won't be silenced." Anger flared in his eyes. He snatched the paper and stormed off. Veronica watched him go, shaky but resolute. Perhaps turning down that money was foolish, but she realized something vital. She needed justice, not just a payout. She walked back into the courtroom, prepared for whatever was next. The hearing resumed, and the judge pressed both sides for clarity. Lisa Bloom reiterated the evidence, the affair, the financial duplicity, the intimidation attempts. Bradley Fisher tried to undermine Juliana Martinez's credibility, but each time Lisa countered with another piece of corroborating evidence. Eventually the judge announced his ruling on the temporary measures. The asset freeze would continue and expand to include any account or property discovered during the ongoing investigation. Moreover, the judge suggested that if further wrongdoing was uncovered, Arthur Caldwell could face criminal charges for fraud or perjury. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Arthur sat rigid, staring straight ahead. Veronica's pulse throbbed in her ears. She knew this was a monumental victory, yet it felt surreal. She'd gone from a naive event organizer to a woman standing on the verge of defeating one of the city's most influential figures. Outside, the press ambushed them again. Arthur rushed past, ignoring the barrage of questions. Veronica stood with Lisa Bloom at her side, delivering a concise statement. "I'm grateful the court has taken steps to protect my rights. The truth is what matters most here." She retreated to a nearby cafe, adrenaline still surging. Laura and Deborah joined her, exchanging hugs and tearful smiles. "You did it," Deborah said softly. "You really stood up to him." But Veronica couldn't bring herself to fully celebrate. The final trial was still ahead, and she knew Arthur wouldn't back down easily. there were still details to unearth more secrets that could emerge. And beyond the legal struggle, she also had to heal personally from the betrayal, from the public scrutiny, from the collapse of the life she once believed was perfect. For now, though, she savored a small taste of triumph. Over the next few weeks, forensic accountants kept uncovering evidence of Arthur's deceptive practices. Each new revelation painted a damning portrait of a man willing to manipulate his philanthropy business ventures and personal relationships to maintain a veneer of respectability. Meanwhile, Arthur's legal team scrambled to discredit sources. They claimed that Juliana Martinez had been bribed, that Deborah Knight bore a personal grudge, that Veronica had orchestrated a grand scheme to frame Arthur. Yet none of these accusations held up under scrutiny. It was a media circus. Talk shows debated the scandal, with some hosts defending Arthur's philanthropic track record, while others condemned his apparent hypocrisy. Late-night comedians even made jokes about hidden yachts and questionable Swiss accounts. Veronica watched it all with a sense of detachment. Her pain was real, but it had become fodder for national entertainment, and she couldn't entirely escape that reality. Amid the legal wrangling, Veronica's personal life stood in shambles. She'd lost friends who sided with Arthur out of fear or loyalty. She avoided major social events, uncertain whether she'd face hostility or pity. The only bright spots were the unwavering support of her mother, Laura Deborah, and a handful of true friends who believed in her. During this time, she rekindled old passions, writing poetry, practicing yoga, volunteering at a local shelter. These small acts gave her a sense of purpose beyond the courtroom drama. She began to realize that she wasn't just fighting against Arthur. She was fighting to rediscover herself, her identity, after years of molding her life around his pursuits. One late evening, she penned a poem about resilience, tears slipping down her cheeks. Maybe she thought this heartbreak would be the crucible that forged a stronger version of herself. As the final trial date approached, Arthur made one last desperate move. His lawyers filed a motion to remove the presiding judge, alleging bias. They produced quotes from prior hearings, claiming the judge had shown a consistent prejudice against Arthur's wealth. The stunt caused a brief delay, but ultimately failed. The appellate court found no grounds for recusal. Yet the maneuver signaled just how far Arthur was willing to go. It fueled Veronica's anxiety, knowing he still had cards to play. She braced herself for the possibility that new damaging information about her might surface, though she couldn't imagine what else Arthur could concoct. And then, in a twist that surprised everyone, the identity of the mystery woman finally surfaced. A tabloid obtained photos of her with Arthur on a private jet. She was identified as Simone Duval, a high-powered consultant known for her ruthless business tactics. The saga deepened. Simone Duval, her name alone carried an aura of intrigue. Rumors about her influence on Arthur's finances spread like wildfire. Some said she was his silent partner, advising him on secret offshore investments. Others claimed she was the mastermind behind his entire operation. Veronica felt a strange mixture of relief and fury. At least now the woman had a name and face, dispelling the painful mystery. But the fact that Simone might have orchestrated Arthur's deceit made her betrayal even more palpable. Word reached Veronica that Simone was preparing to testify on Arthur's behalf, presumably to challenge the narrative around his finances. Lisa, however, wasn't fazed. "If they want to put her on the stand, that could backfire," she remarked. "We have more than enough evidence to contradict anything she says." Still, the thought of facing Simone in court filled Veronica with dread. She braced for yet another confrontation. The morning of the trial's opening arguments arrived in a blur of tension. Veronica had hardly slept the night before. She dressed carefully, choosing a charcoal grey suit and a simple pendant necklace her mother had given her years ago. It felt like armor, an emblem of her roots and the resilience she'd inherited. When she walked into the courtroom, the atmosphere crackled with anticipation. Journalists packed the gallery laptops open and cameras at the ready. Arthur sat at the defense table, stoic Simone Duval by his side, whispering to Bradley Fisher. She wore a power suit in deep burgundy, exuding confidence. Lisa Bloom began her opening statement with measured precision, outlining Arthur's pattern of financial deception, the evidence from Juliana Martinez, and the suspicious timeline of overseas transfers. She ended with a quiet but firm assertion. "This case is about truth and ensuring that my client, Mrs. Caldwell, receives justice." Bradley Fisher responded by painting Arthur as a generous philanthropist, misunderstood and maligned by a vengeful spouse. He lambasted Veronica's aggressive tactics and accused her of orchestrating a smear campaign. Simone Duval nodded in agreement, occasionally whispering suggestions to the defense team. Witness testimonies followed. Deborah Knight took the stand describing the suspicious activity she'd witnessed. Juliana Martinez testified next, her voice trembling, but her story consistent and damning. She detailed how Simone Duval guided Arthur in transferring funds to obscure accounts. She even provided dates and account numbers. The defense tried to poke holes, questioning Juliana's credibility and highlighting her departure from Arthur's employment on strained terms. Yet each jab felt insufficient against the weight of the physical documents she provided. The tension was palpable as the gallery hung on every word, searching for cracks in the narratives. Then it was Simone Duval's turn to take the stand. The courtroom stilled as she stood up, every eye fixed on her striking figure. She wore a sleek burgundy pantsuit and a calm, collected expression, as though the entire proceeding was just another boardroom pitch. With practiced poise, she walked to the witness box and sat folding her hands in her lap. Her voice, when she began, was crisp, authoritative, and free of any trace of guilt. "I am a business consultant," Simone stated. "I was hired by Mr. Caldwell to advise on international expansion strategies. At no point did I assist him in hiding assets or in misleading anyone, including his wife." Lisa Bloom, seated beside Veronica, leaned forward slightly, noting Simone's deliberate choice of words. The air in the room shifted. This wasn't just testimony. It was a performance. Simone continued denying all allegations. She dismissed the email referencing avoiding scrutiny as a misunderstood industry phrase. It referred to competitive market analysis, she claimed. Nothing to do with the divorce. Veronica sat motionless, eyes locked on Simone. Every denial felt like a slap. This was the woman who'd stood in their home, whispered in Arthur's ear, guided him through the maze of deceit. The audacity of her confident denials made Veronica's stomach churn. Lisa approached the podium for cross-examination. "Ms. Duval, let's go over the timeline," she began. Tone calm, but sharp. "You were in frequent communication with Mr. Caldwell in the weeks leading up to his wife's discovery of hidden assets." "Correct. Yes," Simone said. "We were working on a new investment vehicle in the Middle East." Lisa clicked her remote, and the courtroom screen flickered to life, displaying a series of emails, many of them between Simone and Arthur. The subject lines were technical, but one stood out: urgent trust structuring to shield holdings. "Care to explain this one?" Lisa asked. Simone shifted. It was a legal conversation around forming a trust to protect business interests. "Standard." Lisa's voice sharpened. "Standard? Then why does this email, dated 1 week after Mrs. Caldwell confronted her husband?" Mention the need to reroute investments before the asset freeze request goes through. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Simone blinked rapidly, her composure visibly cracking for the first time. "I can't speak to Arthur's intentions," she said. "I just followed instructions. I wasn't aware of any legal filings." Lisa pressed further, presenting internal memos that included Simone's annotations, some even in her handwriting. One clearly read, "Move fast, no paper trail." Simone stammered. "These could have been misinterpreted," Lisa interrupted. "You're under oath, Ms. Duval." Silence hung heavy in the air. Simone's fingers tapped nervously on the wooden edge of the stand. Her earlier confidence dissolved into a growing unease. From her seat, Veronica saw the shift in the jury's expressions. Doubt had crept in. They were no longer seeing a sophisticated consultant. They were seeing someone implicated, someone with too much access, too much knowledge, and too many reasons to lie. Lisa concluded her cross with a piercing statement. "Ms. Duval, you didn't just consult, you conspired, and the evidence shows it." The judge called for a brief recess, allowing the courtroom to breathe. Simone stepped down, face pale, lips tightly pressed. Arthur avoided her gaze. Back at their table, Lisa turned to Veronica. "She's rattled, and that helps us. A lot." Veronica exhaled slowly, her heart pounding. For weeks, she had feared Simone's testimony would destroy her case. But now the cracks in Simone's mask were visible to everyone. The woman who had once operated from the shadows now found herself under the harshest light, and she was beginning to crumble. As the courtroom doors closed behind Simone, Veronica felt a subtle shift in momentum. The tide was turning. Truth, after months of suffocation, was finally clawing its way to the surface. The trial pressed on like a war of attrition. Every day in court felt like a battlefield. And on the final day of witness testimony, the atmosphere was charged with unspoken anticipation. Arthur Caldwell was called to the stand. He adjusted his tie with a measured calm, walking slowly to the witness box as cameras outside continued flashing through the courthouse windows. Dressed in a tailored gray suit, he wore the same carefully constructed expression of dignity he had worn at every gala and photo op for years. As he took the oath, his gaze drifted briefly toward Veronica. She didn't flinch. She'd spent months preparing for this moment. Arthur's attorney, Bradley Fisher, began the direct examination. His tone was sympathetic, almost theatrical. "Mr. Caldwell," he asked, "can you explain your business dealings that have been so harshly scrutinized in recent weeks?" Arthur spoke with the calculated grace of a politician. "I run a multifaceted business empire. It involves us in multiple countries, countless accounts, and teams of advisors. I never intended to hide anything from anyone, least of all my wife." He sighed dramatically. "If there were errors, they were administrative, not malicious. I trusted consultants like Simone Duval to handle financial logistics. I regret not monitoring everything more closely." To the untrained ear, he sounded credible, even remorseful. But Veronica saw the familiar flicker in his eyes, manipulation, wrapped in polished charm. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. Lisa Bloom stood, her legal pad in hand, and walked toward the witness box. "Mr. Caldwell," she began, "do you deny threatening Juliana Martinez with professional retaliation if she exposed your financial arrangements?" Arthur stiffened. "Absolutely. I never threatened anyone." Lisa nodded, flipping through documents. "So this voicemail." She clicked a button on her laptop. "Isn't your voice." The courtroom filled with Arthur's unmistakable tone, harsh and low. "You don't want to make enemies out of people who pay your salary." Think about your future." Gasps broke out. Arthur's face turned a shade paler. "That was taken out of context," he stammered. Lisa didn't blink. Was this also taken out of context? She held up a printout of an email chain between Arthur and Simone discussing offshore accounts. One line from Arthur read, "Move the money before she gets the courts involved." Arthur hesitated again. "I was referring to a business restructuring, not hiding funds from my wife." Lisa tilted her head. "And the timing one day after Mrs. Caldwell confronted you about your affair. That's coincidence." The pressure mounted with every question. Arthur began to unravel, not dramatically, but in subtle, telling ways. He blinked more often. His answers came slower. He glanced toward Simone for reassurance, but she kept her eyes locked on the table. Lisa's final question silenced the room. "Mr. Caldwell, you've portrayed yourself as a victim of media attacks, of betrayal by employees, even of your wife. But isn't the truth far simpler? You cheated. You lied. You hid millions. And now you're trying to rewrite the narrative because you got caught." Arthur's mouth opened, then closed. The room waited, but no defense came, not even from Bradley Fisher, who quietly shuffled his notes. As Lisa returned to her seat, she whispered to Veronica, "We just tipped the scale." Closing arguments followed swiftly. Lisa spoke with quiet confidence, weaving a clear and damning story from the months of evidence and testimony. "This is not about bitterness," she said. "It's about betrayal, about truth, about accountability." Bradley tried one last time to recast Arthur as a flawed but generous man. He invoked Arthur's charity work, his reputation, and even his emotional turmoil. But the energy in the room had shifted. Outside, reporters lined the courthouse steps. Arthur exited first, walking briskly past flashing cameras, face tight. Simone trailed behind him, stone-faced and silent. Veronica emerged moments later, flanked by Lisa and Laura. She didn't speak to reporters that day. She didn't have to, because by now, the world had started to see through Arthur Caldwell, and it was Veronica's truth they believed. The courtroom buzzed with low murmurs as everyone waited for the judge to return with his written decision. The tension in the air felt as thick as fog. Veronica sat in the front row, flanked by Lisa Bloom and Laura Singletary. Her hands were cold, despite the warmth of the courtroom clenched tightly in her lap. Across the room, Arthur sat rigid, jaw-clenched, Simone Duval by his side. Their polished exterior remained intact, but Veronica could see the stiffness in Arthur's movements, the subtle tells of a man expecting defeat. Rain trickled down the tall courtroom windows as the judge finally entered. The room fell into silence, broken only by the shuffling of papers and the occasional cough. The judge adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, and began to read from a printed sheet. After reviewing the substantial volume of evidence, including financial documents, email communications, testimony from key witnesses and cross-examinations presented by both parties, this court finds that Mr. Arthur Caldwell willfully concealed marital assets in an effort to deprive Mrs. Veronica Caldwell of her lawful share in divorce proceedings. A quiet gasp escaped from somewhere in the gallery. Veronica inhaled sharply, eyes locked on the judge as he continued. Furthermore, the court acknowledges a pattern of coercion, intimidation, and manipulation directed at Mrs. Caldwell and at third-party witnesses. These actions are incompatible with the obligations of good faith expected in legal proceedings. The judge paused, glanced over his reading glasses at Arthur, then continued. Accordingly, the court grants Mrs. Caldwell a divorce under terms favorable to her. She shall be awarded a comprehensive settlement that includes ownership of the couple's Chicago estate, a significant share of Mr. Caldwell's disclosed and undisclosed assets, as verified by forensic investigation, and continued protection under the asset freeze until all hidden accounts are accounted for. Arthur's eyes narrowed, lips pressed into a bitter line. Simone looked stunned, her face pale. The judge wasn't done. In addition, he said firmly, "This court is forwarding evidence of potential financial fraud and perjury to the state attorney's office for further investigation." That final sentence landed like a bomb. A ripple of shock spread across the room. Reporters scrambled for their phones. Arthur's posture collapsed ever so slightly, the image of power slipping away in real time. Veronica sat frozen, overwhelmed by a whirlwind of emotions. Relief, justice, vindication, and a strange, sudden weightlessness. After everything, the betrayal, the threats, the humiliations, she had won. Lisa leaned toward her and whispered, "We did it. And he's not just exposed, he's vulnerable." The judge concluded the hearing with a nod and a stern reminder for both parties to comply with post-trial reporting. Then he stood and left robe flowing behind him. As the room stirred to life, Arthur rose, muttering something to his attorney. He refused to look at Veronica. Simone followed him out like a shadow, no longer whispering instructions, no longer in control. Veronica remained seated a moment longer, soaking it all in. The cameras were already swarming outside, and she knew the questions would come. But this moment, this one right here, was hers. When she finally stood, Lisa and Laura embraced her tightly. "I feel like I can breathe again," Veronica whispered, tears brimming in her eyes. Outside, the sky was still grey, but to her it looked brighter than it had in months. Reporters surged toward her, mics outstretched, but this time Veronica faced them without fear. She spoke clearly, calmly. "I'm grateful the court recognized the truth. This was never about vengeance, it was about justice, about refusing to be silenced." She didn't need to say more. Her poise, her strength, and the verdict said it all. That night, Veronica returned to her apartment, set down her keys, and looked out over the city lights. For the first time in a long while, she felt free. Not because she'd defeated Arthur, but because she'd reclaimed herself, her name, her story, her future. And this time, it belonged to her alone. Veronica's breath caught in her throat. She felt tears welling as relief, vindication, and overwhelming emotion washed over her. She turned to Lisa and Laura, embracing them, scarcely believing it was over. Arthur's face was a dark mask of fury. Simone stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. Outside, reporters bombarded Veronica with questions, but for the first time she felt at peace facing their cameras. She spoke clearly. "I'm grateful to the court for recognizing the truth. This wasn't about revenge, it was about fairness and dignity." That evening in the quiet of her apartment, Veronica allowed herself a moment to weep for the marriage she had lost, for the illusions that had shattered. Yet she also felt a new sense of freedom blossoming within her. A chapter of her life had closed, and though scarred, she emerged standing tall. In the end, Veronica Caldwell found more than just a legal victory. She reclaimed her voice, her identity, and her future. The court's ruling froze Arthur's elaborate web of secret holdings, forcing him to face the consequences of his betrayal. Though she lost friends and endured public scrutiny, Veronica discovered a newfound strength within herself. No longer defined by her husband's wealth or reputation, she stepped forward into a life shaped by her own choices. If this story captivated you, please share and subscribe to our channel, so you won't miss more true-to-life drama and inspiring tales of resilience. Every click you make helps us continue bringing you stories of triumph, heartbreak, and the unyielding power of the human spirit. Join our community, share your thoughts in the comments, and stay tuned. More riveting narratives are just around the corner. On a frosty Christmas Eve, just as the world around them sparkled with holiday lights and promise, Nicholas Hamilton walked out of his penthouse door, leaving his pregnant wife Eliza devastated and alone. In a single hour, her world shattered. Little did she know that by morning, her face would be on every news channel across the country. What happened that night would send shockwaves through the media, and their once loving marriage, revealing a labyrinth of hidden secrets, half-truths, and alliances so dark that even Nick, the man at the heart of it all, never imagined they'd see the light of day. Nicholas Hamilton was born into a life most people only dream about. His father, Charles Hamilton III, ran a prestigious financial conglomerate, Hamilton Global Holdings, with connections to old Wall Street families and foreign royalty. His mother, Beatrice Hamilton, came from a line of art collectors in Europe. By the time Nick was 5, he had already visited more countries than the average person would see in a lifetime. Summers were spent at a private villa in Lake Como, winters at a family estate in Switzerland. His friends joked that Hamilton was synonymous with privilege. But with privilege often came the expectation of perfection. Nick was groomed to follow in the Hamilton lineage from a young age, finishing top of his class at Phillips Exeter Academy, then breezing through Harvard with a degree in economics. He was brilliant, daring, and undeniably charismatic. Investors found him charming at 23. Board members found him wise beyond his years at 24. By the time he was 27, Nick had garnered his first Fortune magazine cover for youngest hedge fund prodigy to make $1 billion. He basked in it. He reveled in the accolades in the press and in the power he held over markets. Yet behind the carefully tailored suits and the opulent parties like the annual Hamilton Charity Ball at the Plaza, Nick carried a hollowness he could never quite shake. The constant pressure to outdo himself, to exceed the lofty bar set by his parents, and the relentless scrutiny of the media weighed on him like an anchor. And then came Eliza. Eliza Jordan was the kind of woman no one would ever guess would end up with a billionaire. She hailed from a modest background in upstate New York, her parents running a small diner famous for its apple pie. Eliza grew up working behind the counter, greeting travelers off Interstate 90 and listening to their stories. She developed an open, warm demeanor and an empathetic heart. After college, she dreamed of moving to Manhattan and becoming an investigative journalist. She idolized Christiane Amanpour and Anderson Cooper, determined to make her mark. But big breaks are hard to come by. She spent months pitching stories to local stations, blogging on the side, and occasionally freelancing for small publications. Her first real job in the city, ironically, had nothing to do with journalism. She became a research assistant for a non-profit legal firm investigating corporate malfeasance. One grey November afternoon, she found herself in the middle of a high-profile press conference. A whistleblower was about to expose an executive's dubious dealings, and the press had gathered in droves. It was there that Eliza first crossed paths with Nick Hamilton. He wasn't implicated in the scandal. In fact, his philanthropic foundation was partially funding the non-profit she worked for. He arrived impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, carrying an air of confidence that made every head turn. Eliza, holding a thick binder of legal documents, nearly bumped into him as she rushed to hand over some last-minute notes to her boss. "Careful," Nick said gently as papers flew everywhere. We wouldn't want to compromise your hard work." She looked up, cheeks flushing. I'm so sorry," Nick knelt, helping her collect the documents. Their eyes locked for only a second, but in that moment, the thrumming chaos of the press conference faded to a dull roar. Nick Hamilton, with all his grandeur, was kneeling on the floor, picking up papers for a woman he'd never met. He smirked. "Looks like you're the only person here more anxious than I am." Eliza laughed, nerves loosening. "This is my first big press event. I'd hate to drop the ball." When Nick handed her the final stack of papers, their fingertips grazed. In that fleeting touch, Eliza felt something shift within her. For Nick, it was as if he'd found something honest in a world too often painted in shades of pretense. Their relationship blossomed faster than either expected. Nick was used to women who were impressed by his money, who saw him as a golden ticket to an elite lifestyle. He'd grown wary of that brand of attention. But Eliza was different, warm, unpretentious, and passionately curious about the world. She was initially skeptical. Men like Nick often wore masks. But after a few dinners, early morning coffees near her modest apartment in Queens, and a few philanthropic events they attended together, she realized how genuine his empathy was. When Nick talked about philanthropic projects like funding medical clinics in rural Peru, Eliza's eyes lit up. She asked deeper questions about the people his foundation served, the cultures, and the structural problems that led to inequality. Nick found himself confiding in her. He spoke of the pressure his family placed on him, the exhaustion that came from constantly performing, constantly being the perfect Hamilton heir. Eliza listened, never judging, never rushing to offer hollow solutions. She made him feel seen, not as the billionaire mogul, but as a flawed human being who just wanted to find meaning. Slowly, their weekends became getaways from the crowded Manhattan scene to quiet corners of the Adirondacks. Nick taught her to ski, she taught him how to cook basic meals, and they binge-watched documentaries about journalism heroes. Despite coming from different worlds, they fit perfectly, each rounding out the other's vulnerabilities. One spring evening, 6 months after their first meeting, Nick proposed. It wasn't at some grand gala or a glamorous trip to Paris. He did it in her tiny kitchen in Queens Flower, dusting his cufflinks because they'd just attempted to bake a pizza from scratch. Eliza cried tears of joy, whispering yes through her sobs. The wedding was a whirlwind. The Hamilton name demanded a level of pomp and ceremony. The tabloids ate up every detail. Eliza initially wanted a small, simple affair, but Nick's parents insisted on hosting it at the Hamilton family estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, a sprawling manor that had hosted senators, tech moguls, and even European nobility on occasion. A sea of paparazzi camped outside the estate gates, hoping to snap photos of the commoner bride who had captured the heart of the heir. Celebrity friends of the Hamiltons attended, including business magnates like Bill Gates and well-known figures like Oprah Winfrey, who happened to admire the Hamilton Foundation's philanthropic efforts. Even Elon Musk was rumored to have sent a personal note of congratulations, referencing a conversation he'd had with Nick about future humanitarian projects on Mars, half joke, half serious, in Musk's typical fashion. Eliza felt swept away by the spectacle. As she walked down the aisle, it was hard not to be overwhelmed by the cameras and the crowd. Still, when she locked eyes with Nick at the altar, everything else fell away. In that moment, it was just them. They kissed amid applause, and the newly christened Mrs. Eliza Hamilton tried not to think about the mountain of expectations that came with her new last name. The first year of marriage was blissful, filled with philanthropic trips and adjusting to a new home a luxurious but surprisingly cozy penthouse overlooking Central Park. Eliza settled into the role of philanthropic advisor, working with Nick's foundation to evaluate projects and travel to underfunded communities. Yet beneath the veneer of happiness, tension brewed. Nick's father, Charles Hamilton III, had never fully embraced Eliza. Though he was polite, there was an undercurrent of disapproval in every question he asked about her background, her career aspirations, her ability to handle the social demands of being a Hamilton. Beatrice Hamilton was more welcoming, but she too had her reservations, always measuring Eliza against an invisible, impossibly high standard. The tabloids didn't help. They followed Eliza relentlessly, scouring her small-town past for anything unsavory. They spun half-truths into headlines like "Small-Town Girl in Over Her Head" and "Hamilton Bride Ambition" or "Love." Nick tried to shield her, but every magazine cover was another reminder that her every move was being dissected. Despite these pressures, Nick and Eliza tried to keep their relationship strong. They'd have weekly date nights away from prying eyes, sometimes sneaking into a hole-in-the-wall restaurant in the Bronx, other times strolling through Riverside Park, disguised in baseball caps. But as Nick's responsibilities at Hamilton Global Holdings grew, so did the demands on his time. Late-night strategy sessions, flights to Hong Kong, endless phone calls with investors. Eliza found herself alone in a penthouse full of staff. She barely knew her attempts at philanthropic projects, overshadowed by the press's fascination with her personal life. After 2 years of navigating high society philanthropic travels and the unrelenting scrutiny of the media, Eliza discovered she was pregnant. She told Nick early one morning, surprising him with a tiny pair of baby booties she'd bought at a local boutique. Nick's face lit up. He scooped her into his arms, promising to scale back his work to be a present, loving father. For a while, Nick tried to make good on that promise. He turned down some late-night meetings, delegated more tasks to his trusted friend and CFO Joshua Pierce. Eliza, radiant and hopeful, started imagining their future as a family. She even pictured moving to a quieter brownstone in Brooklyn, where a child could grow up with parks and a sense of neighborhood. Then reality intruded. A major deal was brewing at Hamilton Global Holdings, one that involved a merger with a European bank partially owned by a Middle Eastern sovereign fund. It was complicated, volatile, and could catapult the Hamilton empire into a new stratosphere if handled correctly. Charles Hamilton III insisted Nick oversee negotiations personally. Nick's calendar filled once again. Eliza tried to be understanding, but each day she felt more like a bystander than a wife. When she brought up her concerns, Nick would reassure her. "Just a little longer, Eliza. After this, we'll take that long vacation to the Maldives, away from everything." Still, the baby grew inside her, and with it a gnawing uncertainty about their direction. As December arrived, New York transformed into a wonderland of sparkling lights and holiday cheer. The Hamilton family was expected to spend Christmas Eve at the Connecticut estate. Eliza, now nearly 7 months pregnant, wanted nothing more than a cozy celebration with Nick, her parents who planned to drive down from upstate, and maybe a few close friends. But the Hamiltons had a tradition, a lavish Christmas Eve ball that served as a fundraiser for their foundation. Politicians, celebrities, and Fortune 500 CEOs were all on the invite list. Charles and Beatrice pressed for Eliza to attend to show that the future mother of the Hamilton heir supported the family's philanthropic legacy. Nick was torn. On the one hand, he knew Eliza was exhausted physically and emotionally. On the other, The ball was a chance to seal deals and glean more support for the upcoming merger. He assured her it would be less formal than usual, that she could just make a brief appearance, wave hello, and retire early. Eliza reluctantly agreed. She chose a simple emerald gown that accentuated her baby bump, hoping to avoid the flamboyance that usually came with Hamilton events. The stage was set for a night that would change everything. On Christmas Eve, the Hamilton estate bustled with staff in black uniforms, preparing canapes and setting tables with fine china. A string quartet played softly, while guests arrived in limousines and expensive cars. The media lingered beyond the tall iron gates, waiting for glimpses of the glamorous soiree. Eliza arrived with Nick stepping out of their Bentley to the pop of flash photography. Nick placed a protective hand on her back, guiding her inside. The mansion was festooned with glittering Christmas trees, each meticulously decorated in a different holiday theme. Inside the who's who of society mingled CEOs from Fortune 500 companies, foreign dignitaries, and celebrities. Eliza felt the subtle glances at her growing belly, heard the whispered remarks about the next Hamilton generation. She tried to keep her head up, reminding herself it was for a good cause. Nick left her side to speak with a group of European bankers. Eliza found herself adrift, heading to the open terrace for some fresh air. There she found Joshua Pierce, Nick's longtime friend and CFO, sipping a glass of champagne. "Josh," she greeted him. "Nick is working again, I see." He offered a sympathetic smile. "I tried to convince him to dial it down for tonight, but you know how he is, especially with the merger negotiations at such a delicate stage." Eliza's shoulders sagged. "I just wish we could have one night of normalcy." Before Joshua could respond, a hush fell over the terrace. Charles Hamilton III emerged with a small entourage. He beckoned Eliza closer. "We need you and Nick inside for a photo with the board members. It's important for the Hamilton image." Fighting the urge to roll her eyes, Eliza followed. She stood by Nick, plastering on a polite smile, while cameras flashed. Beyond the lenses, she spotted her parents looking overwhelmed and somewhat lost among the crowd. Her heart ached. She wanted to go to them to share a moment of normal Christmas cheer. But in an instant, Nick was pulled away again, this time by a group of donors from Dubai. Eliza was about to follow when a sudden wave of dizziness overtook her. She hadn't eaten much all day, and her pregnancy made her more prone to fatigue. She steadied herself on a nearby chair, blinking away black spots. Just then she heard it, a muffled but heated argument emanating from behind one of the closed doors leading to Charles Hamilton's study. She recognized Nick's voice, tense and furious. Another voice retorted, "Charles Hamilton." Against her better judgment, Eliza moved closer to the door. She heard fragments. "Not your puppet, the legacy bad time. The baby, my decision." Each snippet ratcheted up her alarm. Suddenly the door swung open. Nick stood there, face flushed, eyes wild with anger. His father was behind him, cold rage emanating from his typically composed features. Nick's gaze flicked to Eliza. "We're leaving," he said, voice trembling. He grabbed her hand and stormed through the corridor out of the mansion, ignoring the startled glances of guests. Eliza followed, stumbling in her heels, her pregnant belly making swift movement awkward. Outside, their Bentley driver scrambled to open the door, but Nick waved him off. He pressed a button on his key fob, and the car's engine roared to life. They sped off the estate grounds, Christmas lights receding in the rearview mirror. For several minutes, Nick said nothing, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Eliza finally mustered the courage to ask Nick what happened. He exhaled a shaky breath. I can't keep doing this. My father is pushing me toward decisions that threaten everything I've built. He wants me to sacrifice our personal life for the good of the Hamilton name. It's always about the legacy. Always. Eliza swallowed. But what does that mean for us? Nick glanced at her eyes darting from her belly to her face. I don't know anymore. They drove in silence back to the penthouse. Nick barely spoke as they entered their lavish penthouse. Christmas decorations twinkled in the foyer, gold ornaments on a towering tree, wreaths on marble pillars, and the faint scent of cinnamon from scented candles. It felt eerily disconnected from the tension swirling in the air. Eliza tried to confront him gently. Nick, talk to me. He turned abruptly, his eyes filled with a turmoil she had never seen before. I can't. God, Eliza, everything is caving in on me. The merger my father's demands the board. And now the baby. Her heart clenched. What do you mean, and now the baby? We both wanted this child. He raked a hand through his hair. Yes, I did. I do. But everything is crashing down all at once. My father is threatening to revoke my position if I don't follow his plan. The press is hounding us. I can't breathe, Eliza. Tears welled in her eyes. So what, you're going to run away from me? From us? He paced across the marble floor. I need space. I can't think straight. I've never felt so trapped. A wave of pain, not physical, but emotional, coursed through her. She lowered herself onto a sofa, trying not to sob. I'm 7 months pregnant, and you're talking about needing space, Nick. We're supposed to be a team. He grabbed his coat and keys. I'm sorry, he whispered, but I can't be here tonight. I just need to clear my head. Panic seized her. Nick, it's Christmas Eve. Nick's expression was torn, but his voice was resolute. I'll call you tomorrow. I promise. I need this. And before she could say another word, he walked out of the penthouse. The door closed with a heavy thud that echoed through the silent rooms. Eliza found herself alone, disbelief turning to shock. She sat there staring at the Christmas tree lights, flickering like distant stars. The baby moved inside her belly, a cruel reminder that she was not alone, but also a reminder that her husband had just left her on Christmas Eve. She tried calling him, no answer. She tried texting, no response. Christmas carols played softly on the home's integrated speaker system, an unwanted soundtrack to her heartbreak. She thought about calling her parents, but she couldn't bear to ruin their night. They were still at the Hamilton estate, likely feeling out of place. She didn't want them driving back in the dark on icy roads, just because of Nick's meltdown. Eliza paced the penthouse terrace, streaking her cheeks, until exhaustion took over in the early hours of the morning. She finally fell into a fitful sleep, the TV in the living room still glowing with late-night talk shows and replays of holiday specials. When Eliza woke around dawn, a sense of dread still clung to her torso. She padded into the living room, searching for any sign of Nick's return. The sofa was empty, the penthouse silent. Feeling restless, she turned on the news. Initially, it was just background noise, holiday segments, weather reports, traffic updates. Then something caught her eye on the ticker at the bottom of the screen. Breaking Hamilton family drama. Her stomach tightened. She turned up the volume. The anchor spoke in a grave tone. In an unexpected twist, This Christmas morning, shocking events have unfolded around the Hamilton family empire. Reports indicate that Nicholas Hamilton, heir to Hamilton Global Holdings, has left his pregnant wife, Eliza Hamilton, and is currently unaccounted for. We have unconfirmed details suggesting a possible connection to the highly anticipated European merger. Stay tuned. Eliza's mouth went dry. Her phone began to vibrate with incoming calls and texts. She switched to another channel. The same story, more speculation. A photo of her taken at the Christmas Eve ball filled the screen. The words, "Where is Nicholas Hamilton?" scrawled beneath. Panic consumed her. Why was the media reporting this so quickly? Why were they implicating her in the same breath as the merger? She attempted to call Nick again, straight to voicemail. Within minutes, the doorman of her building called up. "Mrs. Hamilton, we have half a dozen reporters in the lobby. They want a statement. Shall I call security?" Eliza's heart pounded. She felt cornered, confused. She had no idea what was happening or why it was happening so fast. All she knew was that her husband had walked out on Christmas Eve, and now the world seemed to know and wanted answers. She needed help. In a panic, she dialed Joshua Pierce. His line rang 4 times before he answered in a groggy voice. "Eliza, what time is it?" She explained the situation, voice trembling. "The news channels are talking about me, about Nick, and about some scandal with the merger. Josh." "I'm scared," he cursed under his breath. "I just woke up to a flurry of messages too. Listen, I'll come over. Don't say anything to the press until I get there. Keep your doors locked. If Nick calls, let me know." Within half an hour, Joshua arrived looking as rattled as she felt. He wore a hastily thrown-on sweater and jeans, not his usual immaculate suit. Outside, Eliza could see camera crews gathering on the sidewalk. "I've been trying to reach Nick too," Joshua said, after hugging her gently. "No luck. This rumor about him disappearing and leaving you on Christmas Eve, well, it's half true, I guess. The media's spinning it as a meltdown tied to the merger. They're also claiming you might have threatened to expose some of Hamilton Global's internal dealings." Eliza's eyes widened. "What? That's absurd. I've never done anything like that." Joshua grimaced. "I know, but gossip feeds on confusion. People smell blood in the water. Charles Hamilton must be in damage control mode. They probably want you to keep quiet." She felt a fresh wave of anger and hurt. Nick promised he'd come back. Now he's not answering. And I'm the one under the microscope. "Let's see if we can get to the bottom of this," Joshua said, pulling out his laptop. "We'll try to contact the Hamilton PR team, figure out the real story." Over the next several hours, the media frenzy intensified. Shots of Eliza's face from the night before, a tearful expression as she left the estate, were plastered on news networks and gossip websites. Speculation ran wild. Did Nick leave because he feared fatherhood? Were there financial irregularities about to be exposed? Was Eliza blackmailing the Hamiltons? The speculation about blackmail stung the most. Eliza had never sought money or influence from Nick. She'd always tried to be independent, even after marrying into wealth. As the day wore on, Joshua managed to speak with the Hamilton PR director. He relayed their statement to Eliza. "They're denying all blackmail rumors, but they're also not clarifying why Nick left. They just say he's taking personal time. They want you to do the same and to avoid contact with the media." Eliza shook her head in disbelief. "How can they leave me hanging like this? I'm the one left alone on Christmas, and they want me to go silent." Joshua patted her shoulder. I don't like it either. But they're probably scared. This merger is huge, and any sign of instability might kill the deal. She pressed a hand to her baby bump, feeling a reassuring kick. What about me? What if something happens? This stress can't be good for the baby. His eyes softened. I know. That's why I'm here. We'll figure out a way to protect you. Maybe you should reach out to your parents. Have them come here. Eliza nodded, tears threatening again. Yes. I need them right now. Later that afternoon, while Joshua took calls in another room, Eliza scrolled through her phone. She noticed an email with the subject line, "You need to see this." The sender was unknown, a cryptic address. She opened it hesitantly. Attached was a PDF labeled Hamilton Merger Confidential. Her heart raced. She tapped it, revealing pages of financial documents, email transcripts, and legal correspondences. It looked like evidence of wrongdoing internal communications that suggested Hamilton Global Holdings and its potential partners were engaged in questionable practices. Some lines mentioned bribes to foreign officials. Others indicated accounts in offshore tax havens. Eliza's mind spun. Was this real? Who sent it, and why send it to her? She scrolled further and found references to Nick's involvement. It seemed he might have discovered these shady dealings and was resisting them. If he refused, his father's entire plan for the merger could collapse. Could this be why Nick had stormed out? Was he being blackmailed by his own father to keep quiet, to finalize the merger? Despite potential illegalities, Eliza felt sick. If this information was legitimate, it explained the swirling rumors. Perhaps Charles Hamilton suspected Eliza would blow the whistle given her background in non-profit legal work and her investigative streak. Just as Eliza was about to show Joshua the documents, her phone rang. The caller ID displayed Charles Hamilton III. Anxiety flared in her chest, but she answered. Charles's voice was controlled but cold. "Eliza, I'd advise you not to speak to the press. The situation is delicate. We wouldn't want you to misrepresent the family." Eliza's frustration boiled. "I haven't said a thing. But maybe you can tell me where Nick is." He paused. "Nick is taking time to reconsider his position. That's all you need to know. As for you, I suggest you refrain from meddling in matters that don't concern you." Anger surged. "Excuse me, I'm his wife. This concerns me, and I'm carrying his child." Charles's voice took on a menacing edge. "And that is precisely why I'm telling you to tread carefully. The Hamilton name carries weight enough to protect or to destroy. Good day, Eliza." The line went dead. Eliza's hands shook. She had never liked or trusted Charles, but to hear him threaten her so openly. She knew now the documents in her inbox were the key to everything. She showed the files to Joshua, who read them with horror etched on his face. If these are real, then Hamilton Global is on the brink of committing massive fraud. This would ruin the company if it became public. Eliza was adamant. "We have to find Nick. If he's the one standing against these dealings, he could be in real danger." Joshua dialed Nick's number again. No response. He tried mutual friends, colleagues, but no one had heard from him since the night before. Eliza mulled over her options. She had enough journalistic instinct to know that handing these documents directly to the media would create a firestorm and might endanger Nick if he was somehow caught in the crosshairs. But doing nothing felt like a betrayal of all she believed in. She made a decision. "I'm going to contact an investigative journalist I trust, not to publish yet, but to verify if these documents are genuine." Joshua nodded slowly. Okay. We'll need to keep a low profile. The Hamilton family's PR machine will be out for blood if they suspect you're behind this leak. Eliza steeled herself, determination replacing her fear. I won't let them bully me. Not this time. The day wore on. News trucks lined the street below the penthouse, and the media demanded a statement. The speculation grew wilder. Some tabloids claimed Nick fled the country, others that Eliza was working with the FBI. Seeking a semblance of normalcy, Eliza's parents finally arrived, escorted by building security through the back entrance. They embraced her, trying to provide comfort, but the tension was palpable. She made a few calls to her journalist acquaintance, Sarah Blake, an old college friend who now worked for a reputable newspaper. Sarah agreed to meet discreetly at a nearby cafe that evening, away from paparazzi. Despite Joshua's reservations, Eliza slipped into a cab bundled in a coat and scarf, evading the cameras by using an underground parking exit. She clutched a folder containing printouts of the leaked documents, her heart pounding at the risk. At the cafe, Sarah greeted her with a tight hug. I saw the news. Are you okay? Eliza shrugged. Not really, but there's something bigger happening here. I need your help verifying these files. Sarah's eyes widened as Eliza laid out the documents. She listened intently, scribbling notes. This is huge, Eliza. If these are authentic, it implicates not just Hamilton Global, but major international players. You realize what kind of storm this could create? Eliza exhaled. Yes. That's why I need to be sure. My husband is missing. I believe he walked out because he discovered these unethical deals and his father was forcing his hand. Sarah nodded gravely. I'll use my contacts to authenticate them. But once you light this fuse, there's no going back. Are you ready for that? Eliza swallowed hard. I'll do what it takes to protect Nick and to make sure the truth comes out. Back at the penthouse, Sarah's team worked around the clock, verifying codes, cross-checking email headers, contacting industry insiders who might confirm or deny the authenticity of the documents. By the next morning, Sarah sent Eliza a secure message. These are real. We have multiple confirmations. The scandal could break wide open. That same morning, Eliza received a text from an unknown number. Nick is safe. If you want to see him, come to 30445 West 57th St. Parking, Level B, at 11 p.m. Alone. Eliza's heart soared with hope. But fear soon crept in. Was this a trap? She read the text to Joshua. He frowned. That's a secluded parking garage near the old Midtown offices. It could be a setup. But if it really is Nick... Eliza thought of her baby, her love for Nick, and the vow she made to stand by him. I'm going. I have to. At 10:45 p.m., Eliza discreetly left the penthouse, ignoring reporters clamoring at the front. She called an Uber, instructing the driver to drop her off a block away from the address. Adrenaline coursed through her veins. She arrived at the dimly lit parking garage. The guard at the booth barely looked up from his phone as she entered on foot. Rows of parked cars stretched into the shadows. A tall figure stepped out from behind a concrete pillar. Eliza recognized him in an instant. Nick. She breathed, tears rushing to her eyes. He looked disheveled, dark circles under his eyes, as if he hadn't slept. But he was there, alive, real. They rushed into each other's arms. For a moment, neither spoke, just clung to the other in desperate relief. Finally, Nick pulled back. "Eliza, I'm so sorry. I couldn't stay. I discovered things about the merger. Terrible illegal things. My father expects me to go along with it. When I refused, he threatened me. Threatened us." Eliza blinked back tears. "I know. I've seen the documents. Nick, you should have told me." He sighed. "I didn't want to drag you into this mess, but it looks like it's too late." She held his face in her hands. "We're in this together. Whatever your father is planning, whatever Hamilton Global is doing, it can't continue." Nick nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. "I want to expose them. I want to do the right thing. But I'm afraid of what my father will do to you, to our child." Eliza's voice firmed. "We won't hide. I've already reached out to a journalist. The story is being verified." Nick's eyes widened, a flicker of hope mixed with worry. "If we go public, it could bring down everything. My family's empire, our fortune. We'll be targets." She squeezed his hand. "I don't care about the money. I care about us, and about raising our child without a dark cloud of corruption hanging over our heads." Nick let out a shaky breath, pulling her into another embrace. "Then we do it. Together." The wind howled through Manhattan's canyons like a warning, but inside the quiet offices of the Journal, the storm had already broken. Just before noon, the headline dropped: "Hamilton Global's secret network bribes shell companies and a family divided." The article was front-page top-fold. Sarah Blake's team had verified every line, every document Eliza had brought to her. Nick had provided further testimony, encrypted emails, files, internal communications that traced a web of corruption tied to Hamilton Global Holdings, foreign officials, and multinational banks. The proof was irrefutable, and the world took notice. Within hours, major news outlets picked up the story. Cable networks broke into regular programming. Stock tickers flashed red as Hamilton Global's valuation plunged by billions. Government agencies announced formal investigations. Social media erupted with hashtags like #HamiltonLeak and #LegacyExposed. In their penthouse, Nick and Eliza watched the coverage unfold. The same media that once fawned over them now told a different story, one not of glamour, but of integrity. Nick paced in front of the TV, running a hand through his hair. "It's real now," he murmured. "No going back." Eliza stood and took his hand, grounding him. "That's the point. We don't go back, we go forward." That evening, Anderson Cooper aired a prime-time interview with Nick recorded under tight security. Nick didn't name names, but he confirmed the authenticity of the documents. He described the moral crossroads he had reached, the pressure from his father, the threats, the lies he could no longer abide. His voice shook only once when he said, "I couldn't bring a child into this world while carrying that kind of darkness." Public reaction was immediate and powerful. Some called Nick a traitor to his legacy. Others hailed him as a whistleblower who dared to stand against corruption even when it meant turning on his own blood. But in the quiet corners of their home, as Eliza held his hand and rested her other on her belly, none of that mattered. They had chosen truth, and from that choice, a different kind of legacy was being born. The fallout from the expose was swift and seismic. Overnight, Hamilton Global Holdings transformed from a symbol of financial prestige to a cautionary tale broadcast on every news outlet in America. The company's stock nosedived. Investors scrambled to distance themselves. Regulators opened investigations not only in the US, but across Europe and the Middle East. Nick's name, once synonymous with wealth and power, now floated through headlines alongside words like whistleblower, betrayal, and courage. The media dubbed it the collapse of the Hamilton dynasty. And still through the whirlwind, Eliza and Nick stood firm. They remained at their penthouse, declining interviews and offers for book deals. Eliza focused on her pregnancy, clinging to moments of calm between the waves of public attention. Her doctor concerned by the stress advised rest and limited media exposure. So Nick turned off the television, closed the laptop, and stayed by her side. "I'm not going to lose what matters most," he told her one night, rubbing gentle circles over her swollen belly. "The company's gone. My father's empire is crumbling. But you, and him, you're what I have now." Eliza reached for his hand. "You didn't lose anything worth keeping. You let go of something rotten. That takes strength." Despite the chaos, they were not entirely alone. Joshua Pierce remained a steady presence, helping Nick manage his remaining assets. While much of Nick's fortune was tangled in Hamilton Global stock, now nearly worthless, he still had enough in independent investments to keep them secure. Public sentiment began to shift. Where once there had been whispers of scandal, now there was respect. Eliza's dignity under pressure, Nick's decision to speak out, it resonated with people. They were no longer seen as symbols of elitism, but as humans who had chosen truth over comfort. And though the road ahead was still uncertain, one thing was clear. They had not only survived the storm, they had changed the weather. They had traded privilege for principle, power for purpose. And for the first time in their lives, they could look at themselves and each other with unwavering honesty. The new year dawned not with fireworks, but with subpoenas. Charles Hamilton III, once the towering patriarch of one of America's most respected financial dynasties, now found himself at the center of a high-stakes congressional investigation. The televised hearings transfixed the nation. It was rare to see a man of his stature questioned so publicly, his carefully constructed empire stripped bare under the scrutiny of lawmakers and regulators. In the Hamilton penthouse, Nick and Eliza watched the hearings unfold from their living room couch, their hands intertwined baby supplies, neatly stacked in the corner in preparation for the weeks ahead. Charles sat stiffly before the committee, his signature silk tie knotted with precision, but the calm confidence that once defined him had thinned into tension. Page after page of financial records and email transcripts were laid before him. Bribes, backdoor partnerships, misappropriated funds. With each revelation, the weight of decades of unchecked power bore down on him. For Nick, it was surreal. The man being interrogated was the same father who had taught him how to ride a bike, how to deliver a firm handshake, how to carry the Hamilton name with pride. But that pride had long since been eroded by secrets and manipulation. Eliza sensed his pain and rested her head on his shoulder. "You're not responsible for his choices," she said gently. "You made your own. That's what makes you different." Later that night, Nick's phone buzzed. "Father, the screen," read. He hesitated, then answered. Charles's voice was subdued, laced with weariness. "You've destroyed everything I built," he said, more exhausted than angry. "No," Nick replied quietly. "You destroyed it the moment you decided your legacy mattered more than your integrity." A long silence followed. Then Charles whispered, "Take care of that child. Be better than I was." The line disconnected. Nick stared at the screen, his reflection barely visible in the darkened glass. Eliza moved closer, wrapping her arms around him. And in that quiet moment, the final thread between father and son fell away, not with rage, but with resignation. The old world was gone, and a new one, however uncertain, had begun. Winter still clung to the city, its snow-crusted sidewalks and steel-grey skies, a stark backdrop for what would become the most transformative day of Eliza and Nick's lives. It began quietly just after dawn. Eliza stirred in bed, a dull cramp spreading through her lower back. At first she thought it was nothing, just another ache in the long stretch of late pregnancy. But minutes later the discomfort returned, sharper this time, and closer together. Her breath caught. She placed a hand on her belly, now round and firm. "Not yet," she whispered. "It's too early." Nick, who had been dozing in a nearby armchair after a late-night phone call with a legal team, jolted awake when she called his name. "The baby's coming," she said, voice shaking but steady. Within minutes they were racing through Manhattan in a black SUV, sirens in the distance and headlights slicing through the misty morning. The world outside felt like it was holding its breath. For Nick, every red light felt like an eternity. For Eliza, time blurred as pain and anticipation mingled in waves. They arrived at the hospital just after sunrise. The nurses acted quickly, guiding Eliza through intake as Nick clutched her hand, whispering encouragement between clenched jaws. Labor was swift, too swift. The baby was coming a month early, and there was no time to prepare mentally or emotionally. It was raw and real. Eliza pushed through the fear, her thoughts fixed on the tiny life inside her. And then he arrived. Their son. Small, pink, wailing with strength that belied his early arrival. Nick's hands trembled as he cut the cord. Eliza sobbed quietly, not from pain, but from relief, from joy, from sheer disbelief that after everything, the scandal, the fear, the collapse of everything familiar, they had this. "He's perfect," Nick whispered, holding the baby to his chest. They named him Oliver, a symbol of peace, of hope, of a future rebuilt. In that moment, the cameras, the headlines, the weight of legacy, it all vanished. There was only this tiny child and two people who had fought like hell to give him a better world. And in that sterile hospital room, love reigned quietly, but completely. The months after the exposé were a blur of transition. What once defined Nick and Eliza's lives, boardrooms, fundraisers, headlines now felt like relics of a world they had left behind. The Hamilton name no longer graced the covers of financial magazines as a symbol of power, but it was still present, whispered now in conversations about justice, courage, and corporate accountability. Charles Hamilton III, once untouchable, stepped down from the board of Hamilton Global Holdings. The company entered a grueling period of restructuring overseen by federal investigators and new leadership appointed by court mandate. Several of Charles's closest associates faced indictments, and although he avoided prison time by cooperating and paying substantial fines, his reputation was shattered. Nick, newly divorced from the Hamilton empire, chose not to fight for his stake in the company. "Let them rebuild it without me," he told Eliza. "I want our future built on something real." And so they redirected their energy into something entirely new. With Eliza's background in non-profit legal work and Nick's connections and insight into business, the couple launched an organization focused on ethical entrepreneurship. They called it Clear Path, a foundation committed to promoting transparency, integrity, and accountability in business. Rather than chasing profit, their mission was to elevate the stories of whistleblowers, reform corporate culture, and empower future leaders to do better. Eliza also revived her long-held dream of investigative journalism. Through a podcast titled Inside the Veil, she interviewed corporate insiders, lawyers, and activists about corruption and reform. Her calm, empathetic interviewing style, paired with Nick's honest reflections, quickly built a dedicated audience. Though the Hamilton name no longer held its elite shine, it found something more valuable: respect from communities that valued truth over titles. Nick and Eliza embraced a quieter life, selling off the opulent trappings of their past. The penthouse felt warmer now, not as a monument to wealth, but as a home where love, laughter, and the cries of baby Oliver echoed off the marble walls. They had weathered the storm, and now, beneath calmer skies, they were building something greater than legacy, something rooted in honesty, compassion, and each other. The first day of spring bathed Manhattan in golden light. After a long, relentless winter, both literal and emotional, Eliza finally felt the warmth return. On their balcony, overlooking the soft green of Central Park, Nick sat cradling their baby son Oliver against his chest. The boy slept peacefully, his tiny breaths syncing with the rhythm of his father's heartbeat. Eliza stepped outside quietly, her bare feet padding across the cool stone. She paused to take in the view. Her husband no longer the glossy heir to a billion-dollar empire, but something much more real, grounded human. She sat beside him, the city stretching before them like a promise. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly, her voice barely louder than the rustling leaves. "Blowing it all up. The company. The name." Nick didn't answer right away. He looked down at Oliver, then out toward the skyline he used to own. "I regret the way it happened," he said finally. "The pain it caused. The silence between us when I should have talked to you. But I don't regret doing the right thing. I needed to choose our future over my father's legacy." Eliza nodded, emotion swelling in her throat. "You chose truth over power," she whispered. "And somehow, through all of it, we still found each other." Nick turned to her, his eyes glinting in the morning light. "You gave me a reason to be brave," he said. "You and him." Oliver stirred, letting out a soft sigh. Eliza smiled and leaned into Nick's shoulder, wrapping an arm around both of them. Together they sat in a silence filled with meaning, the kind of silence that comes only after weathering a storm. They had lost nearly everything society once said mattered. But here in the heart of the city, with a baby in their arms and sunlight on their faces, they knew they had gained something far more enduring, an unbreakable bond. And that was everything. Thank you for joining us on this roller coaster journey through betrayal, scandal, and redemption. Nicholas Hamilton's decision to walk away on Christmas Eve set off a chain reaction that not only tore down a corrupted dynasty, but also brought an unwavering love into sharper focus. In the end, courage and truth won out, proof that even in a world where wealth and power often overshadow morality, integrity can light the way. If you found this story compelling and want to be part of our growing community, please like this video, share it with friends who love a good drama, and subscribe for more tales that explore the resilience of the human spirit. Your support keeps the conversation alive and helps us bring you even more thought-provoking stories. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next chapter of real-life drama.